The screen went blank for a second before the message appeared. Enrollment status. Withdrawn. I stared at my laptop, my fingers frozen above the keyboard. This had to be a mistake. I'd been checking this portal every day for weeks, waiting to pay my deposit for Northern State University. My acceptance letter was pinned to my bulletin board. My roommate assignment email sat in my inbox. I refreshed the page 3 times, but nothing changed. My hand shook as I dialed the admissions office. The woman who answered sounded sympathetic, but firm. According to our records, you requested withdrawal 2 weeks ago. We received a signed form and a phone call confirming your decision. That's impossible. I whispered. I never sent anything. She paused. The signature matches our files, and the person who called knew your student ID number and personal details. I'm sorry, but the deadline for reconsideration has passed. I hung up and sat in silence. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. My stepmother, Veronica, appeared in my doorway, arms crossed. Her expression held no surprise, only cold satisfaction. We need to talk about your future, she said. My name is Tyler Brennan. I'm 18 years old, from Portland, Oregon. If you're watching this story unfold, please subscribe to this channel for more fascinating stories like this one. You won't believe where this goes. Veronica sat across from me at the kitchen table, my father beside her. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She slid a piece of paper toward me. My withdrawal form, complete with a forged signature that looked disturbingly close to mine. I did what was necessary, she said calmly. Your father and I discussed this. College isn't the right path for everyone. You discussed stealing my future? My voice cracked. Dad, you knew about this? He shifted uncomfortably. Veronica has valid concerns, Tyler. The cost, the distance, your maturity level. Maybe community college first. I got a full scholarship. I shouted. It wasn't costing you anything. Veronica's eyes narrowed. That scholarship required living on campus, away from family responsibilities. Your father needs you here. For what? I demanded. She smiled thinly. To grow up. To learn that the world doesn't revolve around your dreams. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called the admissions office again and spoke to a different representative. I explained everything. The forged signature, the unauthorized withdrawal, my stepmother's admission. The woman listened quietly. This is highly unusual, she said. I'll need to escalate this to the dean of admissions. 3 days of silence followed. I checked my email obsessively. Finally, a message arrived from Dean Patterson himself. He offered me a single chance. Resubmit all application materials within 30 days, including a personal statement explaining the situation. If everything was in order, they'd grant probationary readmission. 30 days. I had to gather transcripts, recommendation letters, financial aid paperwork, and proof of my scholarship, all of which Veronica had access to. I'd have to do it without her knowledge. I sat at my desk and created a detailed checklist. Step 1. Secure a P.O. box for all future correspondence. Step 2. Contact my references directly. Then I heard Veronica's voice from downstairs. Tyler, get down here. She stood in the kitchen, holding my acceptance letter. I'd hidden it in my desk drawer, but apparently nowhere was safe anymore. You called them, she said, not asking. After everything we discussed, you went behind our backs. You mean after you committed fraud? I shot back. My father entered, looking tired. Tyler, this attitude isn't helping. What attitude should I have when my own family sabotages me? Veronica crumpled the letter. You want to know what I think? You'll never finish anyway. You're not disciplined enough. You'll party for a semester, fail out, and come crawling back here having wasted everyone's time. She called my aunt that evening. I heard her through the walls, spinning a story about my unrealistic expectations and concerning behavior. Over the next week, she contacted cousins, grandparents, family friends. She painted me as delusional, immature, desperate for attention. When I saw my uncle at the grocery store, he patted my shoulder sympathetically. Your stepmother says you're going through a phase. Don't worry, kid. Reality hits everyone eventually. My father made his position clear 3 days later. we wouldn't be contributing financially to my education. Not for tuition, not for housing, not for books. If I insisted on this independence, I'd fund it myself. I'd save $3,000 from birthday gifts and summer jobs. It wasn't enough. I needed income immediately. I found a warehouse job with overnight shifts, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights a week. The pay was decent, and the schedule meant I could still attend classes once school started. I started immediately. The work was brutal. Loading trucks, sorting packages, lifting boxes until my shoulders screamed. I'd finish my shift at dawn, drive to the community college library to study, then sleep in my car for a few hours before my next shift. I showered at the gym. I ate protein bars and instant noodles. After 2 weeks, my body adjusted. After 4, I'd saved another $1,000. But exhaustion crept into everything. I nodded off during practice tests. I confused deadlines. I spilled coffee on important documents. One morning, I woke in my car to find a parking ticket on my windshield and Veronica's car parked beside me. She knocked on my window. I rolled it down halfway. "Living in your car now?" she asked. "This is exactly what I warned your father about. You're self-destructing." "I'm surviving," I said quietly. "For now. But Northern State sent your preliminary enrollment requirements last week. Did you know that? They emailed your father's address, since that's what's on file." I saw them. My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "Nothing. Yet." She smiled. "But probationary admission means they're watching you closely. One mistake, Tyler. That's all it takes." She drove away, leaving me shaking with anger and fear. I contacted Northern State immediately and had my contact information updated to my P.O. box and new email. Then I filed an identity protection request with the university, flagging my stepmother's name as unauthorized to receive any information about my records. But 2 days later, I received a letter. My first semester grades from community college prerequisites had been submitted late. I was being issued an academic warning before I'd even started. The warning letter specified that any academic performance below a 2.5 GPA in my first semester at Northern State would result in dismissal. I'd be starting under scrutiny, one bad test away from losing everything. I was sitting in the library when Professor Bryant found me. He was a retired literature teacher who volunteered as a tutor. He'd noticed me sleeping at a table during his morning shift. "You look like you're fighting a war," he said, sitting down uninvited. I almost brushed him off, but something in his expression made me pause. I told him everything. The sabotage, the warehouse job, the impossible timeline I was fighting against. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I've taught for 40 years, he finally said. "I've seen talented students derailed by less, but I've also seen a determined one succeed despite everything. Which one are you?" "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "Then let's find out. I'll tutor you, help you prepare for placement tests, review your essays, free of charge. But you have to promise me something." "What?" "That you won't quit, no matter what happens." With Professor Bryant's help, I started clawing back control. My essays improved. My practice test scores climbed. I began to believe I could actually do this. Then my scholarship verification documents disappeared. I'd left them in a folder on my desk, copies of the award letter, disbursement schedule, and acceptance confirmation. I'd need them for financial aid processing when I started at Northern State. I'd checked the folder 3 days earlier. Now it was empty. I tore my room apart. Nothing. I called the Scholarship Foundation, but they said replacement documents would take 6 weeks to process. My deadline was in 12 days. That evening, I installed a lock on my bedroom door. Then I rented a small storage unit across town and moved everything important there, documents, laptop, my acceptance materials, everything Veronica might target. But I was too late. My mail was already being intercepted. Letters I was expecting never arrived. Bills I'd set up online were mysteriously canceled. Someone was systematically dismantling my infrastructure. I needed proof. I ordered a security camera online and installed it in my room, hidden behind books on my shelf. I felt paranoid doing it, but I had no choice. 2 days later, I got the footage I needed. The video showed Veronica enter my room at 2 in the afternoon, using a key I didn't know she had. She went straight to my desk, opened drawers, photographed documents with her phone, and pocketed an envelope that had arrived from Northern State. I saved the footage to 3 different cloud accounts. Then I contacted a legal aid clinic and scheduled a consultation. But when I confronted her that evening, she didn't even deny it. "This is my house," she said calmly. "Nothing here is private for me. If you don't like it, you're welcome to leave." My father stood behind her, silent. "I have you on camera," I said. She shrugged. "Doing what?" "Checking on my stepson's well-being, making sure he wasn't hiding anything dangerous." Any court would side with concerned parent. I realized then that confrontation wouldn't work. She was too practiced, too confident. I needed a different strategy. I became invisible, polite, quiet, compliant. I stopped arguing, stopped defending myself, stopped reacting to her provocations. When she made snide comments, I smiled and nodded. When relatives repeated her lies, I said, "Everyone's entitled to their opinion." Veronica seemed pleased by my apparent defeat. She stopped watching me as closely. My father relaxed. Meanwhile, I redirected everything. All mail went to my P.O. box. All important documents lived in my storage unit. I set up automatic notifications for any attempt to access my student accounts or financial records. Professor Bryant and I met 3 times a week at a coffee shop across town. He drilled me on writing skills, study techniques, time management. He reviewed every piece of my readmission application, and slowly my life stabilized. I was still working overnight shifts, still sleeping in my car some nights, still exhausted, but I was making progress. When my final semester grades posted, I stared at the screen in disbelief. 4.0 GPA. Perfect scores across all 4 classes. The letter from Northern State arrived at my P.O. box 3 days later. Not only was my probationary status approved, I'd been placed on the dean's list for academic achievement before even officially enrolling. I'd done it. Against everything, I'd actually done it. At Sunday dinner, Veronica mentioned my community college courses to visiting relatives. "He's taking some beginner classes," she said dismissively. "Basic requirements. Nothing challenging." My uncle nodded sympathetically. "Well, it's a start." I said nothing. I just smiled and passed the potatoes. But Professor Bryant had other plans. He called me 2 days later, excitement clear in his voice. "There's a national scholarship opportunity," he said. "The Henderson Academic Excellence Grant. Full ride plus a stipend for students who've overcome significant adversity. The application deadline is next month." "I already have scholarship funding." I reminded him, "This is different. This one comes with public recognition, networking opportunities, and a platform to tell your story. Tyler, this could change everything." I hesitated. Applying meant risking Veronica finding out. It meant making myself visible again. "Do it," Professor Bryant urged. "Stop hiding. Start winning." The application was extensive. It required academic transcripts, essays, letters of recommendation, and documented evidence of obstacles overcome. Professor Bryant helped me craft every word. I wrote about the forged withdrawal, the sabotage, the overnight shifts, and sleeping in my car. I included copies of security camera footage, the threatening emails, the timeline of interference. I wrote about resilience, determination, and refusing to let others define my worth. It was the most honest thing I'd ever written. 3 weeks later, I received an email requesting an in-person interview at their Portland office. The interview was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon, exactly when Veronica had planned a mandatory family gathering. When I told my father I couldn't attend the gathering, Veronica's expression hardened. "This family comes first," she said. "Whatever you have planned, cancel it." "I can't," I replied calmly. "Then you're choosing to disrespect this family," she said. "There will be consequences." I met her gaze. "I understand." The morning of the interview, Veronica announced a family emergency. My cousin had been in a car accident and was in the hospital. We needed to leave immediately. I called my cousin. He answered on the first ring, confused. "Car accident? I'm literally at work right now." I thanked him and hung up. Then I drove to my interview. The panel consisted of 3 people, 2 foundation representatives, and a former scholarship recipient. They asked about my academics, my goals, my challenges. I answered honestly, without drama or exaggeration. "Your professor speaks very highly of you," one woman said. "He called you the most determined student he's encountered in 40 years of teaching. He's been my anchor," I said simply. They asked about my family situation. I showed them the documentation, not to attack Veronica, but to demonstrate what I'd overcome. When I left 90 minutes later, I felt lighter than I had in months. Veronica was waiting when I got home. "Where were you?" "An interview," I said. "For what?" "An opportunity." I walked past her in my room and locked the door. The email arrived 4 weeks later. I was sitting in my car between shifts when my phone buzzed. "Dear Tyler Brennan, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Henderson Academic Excellence Grant." I read it 3 times before it felt real. $25,000. Full scholarship. Public recognition ceremony at Northern State's graduation in May. They wanted to feature my story in their newsletter. They wanted me to speak at their annual donors event. They wanted to celebrate what I'd accomplished. I sat in that parking lot and cried. Professor Bryant called an hour later. He'd received notification as my primary reference. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You earned every bit of this." I didn't tell Veronica. Not yet. I had other plans. But she was planning too. 2 weeks later, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Your graduation is in May, correct? From Northern State?" "Yes," I said carefully. "We'd like to host a celebration dinner. Invite the family. Show our support." I knew a trap when I heard one. Veronica spent the next 2 months poisoning the well. She called every relative, every family friend, everyone who might attend my graduation. She told them I was struggling academically, barely passing, having emotional difficulties. "We're worried about him." I heard her tell my grandmother, "He's under so much pressure. We just want to be there for him when he realizes he's in over his head." Invitations to family events stopped coming. Relatives stopped returning my calls. When I did see them, they spoke to me with exaggerated patience, like I was fragile. My cousin asked if I was getting help. My aunt sent me information about community college transfer programs. Veronica was building a narrative. Tyler is failing, but we love him anyway. Meanwhile, Northern State's Honors Committee sent me a letter. Based on my academic performance and the Henderson Grant recognition, I was being considered for departmental honors, the highest distinction a graduating student could receive. The committee wanted to interview me. They wanted to understand my journey. I met with the Honors Committee in a small conference room on campus. 3 professors and the department chair listened as I explained my path, not as a sob story, but as a testament to persistence. "Your professor submitted quite a detailed recommendation," the chair said. "He mentioned several instances of interference with your education. Can you elaborate?" I hesitated. I didn't want this to be about Veronica. I wanted it to be about what I'd achieved despite her. "I faced obstacles," I said carefully. "Some were external circumstances. Some were created by people who didn't believe in my potential. But I learned that other people's doubts don't have to become your limitations." I showed them my timeline, the forged withdrawal, the reapplication under duress, the 4.0 GPA while working overnight shifts, the Henderson Grant. "This is remarkable," one professor murmured. The committee chair leaned forward. "Tyler, would you be comfortable with us sharing portions of your story at commencement? Not as exploitation, but as inspiration." My heart pounded. What would that involve? Recognition during the ceremony. Acknowledgement of your achievement. Nothing that would make you uncomfortable, but we believe other students need to hear this. I thought about Veronica sitting in that audience, confident in her narrative. "Yes," I said, "I'm comfortable with that." The committee requested documentation. Not to verify my story, they assure me, but to protect both me and the university. I provided copies of everything. Emails, photos, screenshots, security footage, the legal consultation notes. I never accused Veronica by name in any official document. I simply presented facts. Unauthorized withdrawal submitted by a household member, identity theft of application materials, systematic interference with educational mail. The facts spoke for themselves. The committee's reaction was stronger than I expected. The department chair called me personally 2 days later. Tyler, what you've documented here isn't just adversity. This is educational sabotage. We want to make sure you have the support and protection you need going forward. I'm okay, I assured him. I just want to graduate and move on. You'll do more than graduate, he said firmly. You're going to walk across that stage with every honor this institution can bestow, and the people who tried to stop you will have to watch. His words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like inevitability. I hand-delivered graduation invitations to my family. Veronica accepted hers with a knowing smile. Of course we'll be there, she said warmly. We're so proud of you, Tyler. Despite everything, you're finishing school. The emphasis on finishing was deliberate, not excelling, not thriving, just barely making it across the finish line. She posted on social media about our graduate and how family support makes all the difference. She fielded comments from relatives praising her patience with her challenging stepson. My father remained silent through all of it. Professor Bryant called to check on me. How are you holding up? I'm ready, I said. Whatever happens, I'm ready. The truth has a way of emerging, he said, especially when it's been buried this long. Graduation day was set for May 15th. Veronica began planning what she called a celebration, but what I recognized as performance, her final chance to control the narrative. The week before graduation, Veronica invited relatives to a pre-ceremony dinner. She prepared talking points about my struggles and her unwavering support. She'd framed photographs of our family, including several that featured her prominently with me in the background. I just want everyone to know how hard this has been, she told my aunt, loudly enough for me to hear. But we never gave up on him. She planned to sit front row at graduation. She'd bought a new dress. She'd arranged for a professional photographer to capture the moment, presumably my mediocre achievement that she'd heroically supported. What she didn't know was that the graduation program had been finalized. Professor Bryan had shown me a copy. My name appeared in 3 separate places: the general graduate list, the dean's list recognition, and a special honor section. The program also included a note, special recognition to be announced by Dean Patterson. Veronica assumed it was a standard procedural mention. She had no idea what was coming. May 15th arrived with clear skies. The auditorium was packed with families, hundreds of graduates in caps and gowns. I sat with my department, watching relatives file into the front rows. Veronica wore navy blue and pearls. She positioned herself center aisle, phone ready to record. My father sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in his suit. Behind them, I saw aunts, uncles, cousins, all briefed on Veronica's version of events. Professor Bryant sat in the faculty section, catching my eye and nodding encouragingly. Dean Patterson approached the podium. The ceremony began with traditional remarks: pride in the graduating class, hopes for the future, gratitude to families. Standard procedure. Then he paused and looked down at his notes. Before we begin conferring degrees, he said, I'd like to recognize several students who exemplify the resilience and determination this institution values. Veronica leaned forward slightly, phone raised. Our first recognition goes to Tyler Brennan, graduating summa cum laude with departmental honors in communications. My name echoed through the auditorium as I stood. I walked to the stage, my legs surprisingly steady. Dean Patterson shook my hand and gestured to the microphone. Tyler Brennan, he began, arrived at Northern State under exceptional circumstances. After having his initial enrollment fraudulently withdrawn, he reapplied under probationary status while working overnight warehouse shifts to fund his education independently. I watched Veronica's expression shift from pride to confusion. Despite systematic interference with his application materials, housing arrangements, and financial aid documentation, the dean continued. Tyler maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while working 40-hour weeks and sleeping in his car. Murmurs rippled through the audience. I saw relatives turn to look at Veronica, whose face had gone pale. This year, Tyler was awarded the Henderson Academic Excellence Grant, one of the most competitive scholarships in the nation, recognizing students who overcome extraordinary adversity to achieve academic distinction. The dean gestured to the side of the stage, where Professor Bryant now stood. I'd like to invite Professor Howard Bryant, Tyler's mentor, to say a few words. Professor Bryant approached the microphone with the same calm authority he'd shown in our tutoring sessions. He looked directly at the audience. In 40 years of teaching, he began, I've encountered many talented students, but Tyler Brennan is exceptional not because of his intelligence, though he possesses that in abundance. He's exceptional because of his character. He paused, letting the words settle. Tyler succeeded despite people who actively tried to prevent his education. People who forged legal documents. People who intercepted his mail, canceled his scholarship verification, and spread false narratives about his capabilities. The audience was completely silent now. I have here, he held up a folder, documented evidence of every instance of interference Tyler faced. Security footage, email records, testimony from university officials. This isn't speculation. These are facts. I watched my father's face change. Realization, horror, shame washing over him in waves. I want to thank those individuals, Professor Bryant continued, because they inadvertently taught Tyler the most valuable lesson any educator could impart. That truth ultimately prevails over deception, and that resilience is stronger than sabotage. The silence broke into scattered applause that grew into a standing ovation. I stood frozen at the microphone, watching hundreds of people rise to their feet, all except Veronica, who sat rigid in her chair, her face expressionless. Relatives around her were whispering frantically. My aunt had her phone out, apparently searching for something online, probably the Henderson Grant website, where my story and photo had been featured. My father stood slowly. His eyes were red. He was clapping, but tears ran down his face. Veronica grabbed his arm, hissing something I couldn't hear. He pulled away from her and kept clapping. My uncle, the one who called my dreams a phase, stood with his hands over his mouth, shaking his head in what looked like disbelief. My grandmother, who'd been told I was emotionally unstable, was crying openly. Dean Patterson returned to the microphone. Tyler will now receive his diploma, his honors cord, and recognition as this year's Henderson Scholar. As I accepted each item, I caught Veronica's eye. She was standing now, not applauding, just staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Betrayal, maybe, or finally seeing me as something other than an obstacle control. After the recognition, the ceremony continued with standard degree conferrals, but the atmosphere had shifted. My story hung in the air, recontextualizing every graduate's achievement. When the ceremony ended, relatives swarmed me before I could leave the stage. My aunt hugged me, apologizing through tears. My uncle gripped my shoulder, unable to speak. My grandmother held my face in her hands and said, "I'm so sorry we didn't see it. I'm so sorry." My father waited at the edge of the crowd. When we finally faced each other, his voice broke. "Tyler, I knew something was wrong. I told myself you were just being difficult. That Veronica was right about you needing tougher love. But I knew. Deep down, I knew." "Yeah," I said quietly. "You did. I was weak. I chose the easy path. I let her convince me that protecting our marriage was more important than protecting my son." He wiped his eyes. "I can't take that back. But I want you to know what you did, what you achieved despite us. I've never been more proud or more ashamed at the same time." Veronica had disappeared. Someone said they'd seen her leave immediately after my recognition, driving away alone. I graduated summa cum laude with departmental honors. The Henderson Grant funded my first year of graduate school. Professor Bryant and I stayed in touch. He attended my master's graduation 2 years later. My relationship with my father improved slowly. He divorced Veronica 6 months after graduation and began therapy to understand why he'd enable her behavior. We set boundaries. We rebuilt trust carefully. We're still rebuilding. I never heard from Veronica again. My aunt told me she'd moved to another state, remarried, and deleted all her social media. Her narrative, the one she'd spent years constructing, had crumbled in a single ceremony. I started a nonprofit that helps students facing educational sabotage. We provide legal resources, academic support, and emergency housing. Last year, we helped 43 students complete their degrees despite family interference. I learned that revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about becoming so successful that their sabotage looks ridiculous in retrospect. It's about letting truth speak louder than lies. I won without hatred. Only documentation, persistence, and a refusal to let someone else's limitations become mine. Veronica tried to keep me from college. Instead, she gave me a story worth telling and a mission worth pursuing. Justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it just looks like truth, spoken clearly at exactly the right moment. And that's enough.